Hi everybody, my name is Nathan Doyle. I'm an accounting and management major, and I chose those fields because I'm very interested in seeing businesses grow, and I am a sophomore. So let's just go ahead and get started. For my industry interview, I sat down with Billy Cowan, who is the Vice President / Regional Operations Manager of the Central Kentucky region of Community Trust Bank Incorporated. I chose to interview Billy because he's somebody I have a fairly close relationship with, and he's still at least a fairly high-ranking member in the field that I'm very interested in going into, which is the private sector. Billy's worked for Community Trust Bank for approximately 20 years, but he's actually worked in the banking industry for much longer than that. Prior to working at Community Trust, Billy was actually the CFO of a small locally owned farmers bank in my hometown of Williamsburg, Kentucky. Billy has a lot of experience in the banking industry, and really he shed a ton of light on important skills necessary to find success in the field, a mentality you have to find success, and even the future of the industry in the face of a lot of budding uncertainty. So let's move on. Next slide. The first big theme that sort of popped up when I was talking to Billy was just how important good communication skills are. A lot of times we think of this as just something cliche, but when I talked to Billy, it really did seem like it was something incredibly important. The second big theme that sort of showed itself a lot was this idea of being a servant leader, of sort of putting your own needs and desires below the needs of your organization or your clients. And the third big point we talked about was the future of the banking industry, namely in the face of a lot of increasing technology and the increasing presence of online banking, and really the future of the industry as respect to smaller sorts of branches such as Community Trust Bank. So let's go ahead and dive right into communication. Next slide. Now I know we always hear about how important communication skills are in class, from our teachers, from our advisors, from faculty, and from recruiters, but for me personally at least, this was the first time I ever heard somebody tell me in the industry that communication skills are incredibly important outside of a classroom setting. One thing though that Billy did talk about with me that I thought was really unique was how important communication skills are, not just with your clients on a sort of provider-client basis, but also with respect to your peers. Communicating with people who are on the teller line in a bank, communicating with loan officers, communicating with management, upper management. Really, communication skills are just incredibly important at all levels within the organization, just as they are without. Obviously, this requires a great deal of flexibility on the part of, the general worker, being able to communicate in different ways and adapt your communication style based upon who you're talking to. So really one thing he kept hitting on was just how important flexibility and communication skills were at all levels of an organization. Next slide. The second big theme was this idea of servant leadership, of seeing a value in what you do. Billy really told me the biggest thing he sees in people who do not find success in the industry is that they have a just a job mentality, and that if you want success you have to take a not just a job mentality. You have to really be willing to put others' needs above your own personal agenda, and you have to be willing to sort of, at least sometimes, do things that may seem for the worse of your own segment of the organization, even if they may benefit the whole organization. This is really counterintuitive to a lot of people, to sort of say, it might not be best for my division, but it's best for the company as a whole. And that's really something he said you have to embody, and you have to really sort of make yourself believe if you want to find success in banking. Next slide. The last sort of point we talked about was the future of the banking industry, namely the brick and mortar branches in small communities, really in the face of online banking by really big, large-scale firms. Obviously, this is going to create a lot of uncertainty for these small communities who may not have the money to, start these online sort of programs. Billy really talked about Community Trust's position on this is they have an online system now, but prior to their sort of taking on this sort of system, they really stressed how important the personal touch was with their clients and with their customers. That, at least in his belief and the company's belief, is what would set them apart from a larger scale bank, say like a U.S. bank or something like that. That's what would make Community Trust Bank special, their personal touch. They would go out of their way to know you. They would go out of their way to really take an interest in what you're doing. Going back to the servant leadership point just a moment ago. So really that's another huge point we talked about as far as the future of the industry goes. Next slide. In conclusion, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, in our discussion, Billy and I talked about a lot of different stuff, and he gave me a lot of advice, but easily the best piece of advice he gave me was what I said earlier about the idea of being a servant leader. Being a servant leader is something that is inherently obvious to me, but it's not something I would have recognized unless it was pointed out at first. This idea that you need to put forth your clients' needs above your own and to submit your will to the will of the organization as a whole is something that makes sense once it's pointed out, but it's not something that sort of clicked for me at the very beginning. And that was easily the best piece of advice he gave me. As far as my interest in the field, I'm still 100% definitely interested in this field, even in light of the uncertainties facing this industry with online banking, especially in the smaller communities. I still see enough to be hopeful for after my discussion with Billy that I'm still incredibly interested in this field, and I'm definitely going to seek opportunities to learn more about the private banking industry in the future. Thank you.